good that you provide us with some typing noise, David. We know that audio is working.
Yeah, I suppose. I have things set up with a room mic as opposed to a headset mic. But yeah, I think audio is working. I see Gory out there. Let's check. There's Wes, Magnus. You're either somewhere, and there's Martin. Okay, I think the cast of characters is assembled. Right? So I guess I get to run the chair slides. So welcome to the first Transport Area Working Group meeting session at IETF 108 online. I want that window. Okay, cool. This is the note well. If you haven't seen it before, please read it. It applies to everything that happens in this meeting. Okay. Need a note taker and a Jabber scribe. Most important person we need is a Jabber scribe, and recommendation here is to run Jabber in a separate window. So that you can join the mic queue and monitor the Jabber session at the same time.
David Spencer has volunteered to be Jabber scribe.
Magnificent. And for note taker, I think Michael Scharf has volunteered to do his note taking, but in practice, folks, what I've done is I've pasted the entire agenda into the shared note-taking application, which is now CodeMD. It's replaced Etherpad. Please type in there. We're not after all the blow-by-blow. We really do need to record anything significant that we decide upon. Okay. Since this is a new Meetecho experience for most of us, a few tips. Separate tabs and windows may be easier to use for meeting notes so that you...
Interesting.
So, did all the shares dropped off? They're back there.
I was busy talking, and it decided to cancel my mic for me. Where did I stop speaking?
Almost, I would say 45 seconds ago, it feels like.
All right, let's see.
And you have video as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Hang on. All right.
So we have notes being typed into the online tool, and you're picking up from there, David.
All right, notes being typed into the online tool. So I must have been on. Okay, I must have been back here anyhow. So we've got a Jabber scribe, we've got note taker. Please feel free to read the online tool. I just dropped the agenda in there. Hang on, let me see if I can get. I'm having trouble with multiple screens, demonstrating how much fun this is. Okay. Some Meetecho usage tips. For Jabber and the note, separate windows or tabs are a really good idea to keep Meetecho focused on speakers, slides, and queue. In particular for chat, a separate Jabber client helps a lot in that it allows Meetecho to stay on the speakers and queue. Please use the microphone queue for in Meetecho. Click the microphone icon with a hand, not the one with the triangle. That way you'll join the mic queue and the chairs will turn on your audio to recognize you. Please don't send video in Meetecho. It might work, but Meetecho had problems with multiple video displays during testing, and we just as soon not invite the problems to rear them to show up in this session. Chairs will display all slides for this meeting. Document review request. Please, folks, draft reviews are how the IETF gets work done. So please review documents here and in another working group. If you'd like documents you care about reviewed, please contribute by reviewing other documents. Okay, accomplishments and status. I've gone back 2 IETFs here, back to Singapore. We have 3 RFCs been published since Singapore. These are the 2 forward error correction RFCs plus the tiny MT32 pseudo RNG RFC that supports the sliding window mechanisms. Big progress. Our draft that is part of the infamous WebRTC draft cluster is now not only in Auth48, it's in Auth48 done. And we got the updates for the LEPHB into that draft. So the transport area is no longer on the critical path for finally getting all the WebRTC drafts published as RFCs. Many thanks to everybody for the patience and sticking with them. I think this draft has spent about 4 years at the RFC editor, which is not a record that we want to try to beat in the future. The datagram MTU discovery draft is at the RFC editor being worked on, but right now I think the RFC editor is putting a lot of resources into trying to get that WebRTC cluster done and out. There are no IEDs at the IESG yet. We have 3 internet drafts with working group chairs and authors post working group last call. The 2 ECN encapsulation drafts, Bob and I need to put our heads together offline and come up with some fragmentation text that we can live with, and that doesn't try to modify RFC 3168. Now that some of the excitement around what to do with L4S, SCE, and ECN has died down, we might have some cycles to work on that. Transport header confidentiality impacts. I just sent the note to the list announcing the conclusion of the 3rd and last working group last call on this one. It's now waiting for a Shepherd write-up, and it'll be on its way and in our AD's hands shortly. We have no IDs working group last call. We're likely to do working group last call on the SCTP NAT draft soon. We have these 7 additional drafts that are in the working group. Most of these are on the agenda. Tunnel congestion feedback is not. That one's been more or less on hold while progress is made elsewhere on drafts that use that. Bunch of related drafts. 6-man is working on Path MTU discovery for IETF v6. Loops. There is a BOF Friday first thing. This is fairly important as they're basically proposing to do some amount of loss detection and reaction on part of a path. Not going to discuss it more here, but please, we do need to have some good transport representation in that BOF because they're looking at trying to do better on loss, and that interacts strongly with congestion control, which we all know from experience. This SFC draft, IETF SFC and SATC support, this is the draft that uses tunnel congestion feedback. That's over the SFC working group. Low latency DOCSIS draft has been sent to the independent submission editor, and we put the datagram path MTU discovery via UDP options into a separate draft that right now is an individual draft. As we get UDP options moving forward, the working group will likely be asked to adopt this draft to pick up that functionality. Elsewhere, over in the interior working group, there are 3 drafts of interest. There's a tunnels draft, there is a fragmentation fragility draft, and SOC 6. And then there's a couple of SCTP drafts listed on this slide that have been submitted as possible additions to SCTP. Okay.
David, we have Bob in the queue. Would we like to take him?
Hang on, what have I got here? Yeah, let me pick up Bob. I suspect okay. Yes. Bob, go ahead. Sorry.
Right. It was actually, can you guys slide? It was just not on the encapsulation thing. It was on the, can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, I can hear you. Which slide do you want?
Yeah, that one. So the subjective IC, there are two. There's one that displays latency boxes. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, your audio is really
I'll write a
choppy.
message.
Can you type what you want to say into chat and somebody will read it? Bob says, in addition to low latency DOCSIS, there's also a queue protection draft, both of which have gone to the independent submission editor, both of which will be useful information for how these topics have been addressed in DOCSIS context. Good enough, Bob? Cool. And as noted on these encapsulation drafts, Bob and I are going to put our heads together offline and try to come up with some fragmentation text that'll get these drafts moving in. We know what has to be done, and we've both been way too busy doing other things, and this language is not going to be the easiest thing to write. Okay. I'll try to pay more attention to the mic cue. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So this is the overall agenda outline for the meeting. We are in the middle of we are in the middle of getting things started. We're about to go do some agenda bashing. We have drafts. We have a milestone review that I'm going to try to go through relatively quickly. Drafts today, more drafts on Thursday. All right, milestones review. We have 5 milestones on this slide that have effectively gone past us. With luck, within the next month, 3 of these we checked off as done. And so, as opposed to trying to revise the milestones in this meeting, we're going to see if we can't get those 3 milestones done and then come up with better dates for the other 2 offline between the chairs and the draft authors. Preview of upcoming attractions. The SCTP revision draft is intended for September, L4S for October, and another couple of drafts for the end of this year. Best laid plans of mice and men have been laid low by a number of things, including the virus. These look a little bit aggressive. Chairs will work offline to try to come up to see whether we need to make adjustments to these. Okay, it's agenda bashing time. So here's the agenda. Document status, charter, and accomplishments, including working group drafts, related drafts, and milestones. Did that. Items 2 and 3 are the agenda and agenda bashing. You are here. I'll read through the agenda and we'll come and then we can bash it. Today we're going to go to a couple of SCTP drafts, the updated spec and the NAT draft, followed by 2 protocol drafts, update on the UDP options draft. That draft, I believe, is expired and needs to be resubmitted, but we are still trying to work on it. And the NQB draft, a PHP for non-queue building flows. Then Nat for Quick is on this agenda as individual draft. We're expecting only a brief update, as I believe this is headed for the Quick Working Group. Martin will explain when the time comes. Thursday, we have two parts. First part is the working group drafts on ECN, which is a status and an update on the LFRS drafts, plus some discussion on plans for drafts in both TCP Prague and L4S operational guidance. The need for these was identified during the previous interim meeting. Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, indeed.
2 slides back, just review the upcoming milestones. Just noticed a typo.
Hang on a minute here. Back to here. This one.
Right. The last one on the list, the NQB draft, is actually the milestone is to submit that as a proposed standard RFC, not informational.
We'll fix. I will make a note and fix that. Please note that in the. Please put that in the minutes as well, so we notice that.
Okay.
And I'm making a note to myself to fix chair slides, so that anyone who gets the meeting slides later will get that that correct. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to ask to bash our own agenda, David. I think my communication with Joe had a time zone problem. So Joe's made slides on UDP options, but we don't have them. So I suggest we punt that to the next time slot for TSVWG. It will be short.
All right. We consider the agenda bashed to do that. Okay. All right. So 5.1 is going to move to Thursday. All right. If we have, let's see, we had at least one request to take up these drafts today. In particular, the time zone on Thursday is very bad for at least the authors of the HPCC++ draft. And if the UDP option's off the agenda, maybe we can try to do these today. Thoughts? Gore, do you want to try to do that?
If the presenters want to drop us an email and tell us during the meeting, then we could go and do that.
Okay. I think we can give that a shot. Unfortunately, I can't quickly scan the attendee list and figure out whether we've got the presenters here or not.
It'll become apparent. That's
okay,
fine.
so presenters of these two drafts, draft Pan and draft Die, please drop the chairs an email note if you're online and would be willing to present towards the end of this session. Okay, so the agenda's bashed, and I need to get on the right screen to go change slides. And the net is that UDP options will shift to Thursday. We'll do some kind of update there, and we may try to bring the data center congestion control drafts into today if we can. And with that, I think our next step is the 4960 BIS draft. Let me go get the slides for that.
So, Michael, are you online? Do you want to put yourself in the queue?
All right, let's see. Did that work? Oops. Not yet. Hang on.
Yeah, but the button moved, so I killed your video because it was in the same place.
All right. I think I've got the slides into Meetecho.
Yep.
Michael,
Yes, I'm here.
let me know when I need to advance the slides for you.
Yeah, next slide. So the update is that we have a 7th revision of this document. Basically, the changes are addressing comments from Gori, which are editorial changes, and he spent some time to double check mandatory text. So there was a lot of mandatory text used in notes that has been changed. And there was a mandatory text in the ICMP description, which is an appendix. So it was also the goal was also to not have mandatory text in appendix. So we moved the ICMP text from the appendix to the main text. That's what's in the 7th revision. Next slide. And so what is work in progress? One issue brought up by Gori has not been addressed. I will discuss that on the next slide. If that issue is addressed, then the document is has no open issues except for changing the XML sources from B2 to B3, which means with the formatting stuff that might be a bit tricky, but that will be done. And then it's ready for working group last call. So if you're interested in, if you're willing to review this document, I think the authors and the chairs are interested in that. Next slide. And this is the last open issue, and it's Appendix A. Appendix A of RC 4960 describes how to use ECN in SCTP. Actually, it mostly describes the packet formats being used. So how do you negotiate ECN support and how do you signal other stuff? When it comes down to actually what is done, it's very preliminary and hand waving, because at the time when the document was written, things were not pretty stable. So we have this text in an appendix and it has mandatory text. And so Gori wants to get rid of this. And there are at least 3 options. One is remove the appendix and put the discussion of ECN for SCTP in a separate document. We did this in the past. This has never been adopted in the TSV working group, but there is a starting point. The second option would be keep the text in Appendix A, but remove the mandatory text. So just work around this thing. Or the third option is move it to the main text. So the question was what to do, and I talked about this with Randy Stewart yesterday. Move the text to the main text is, I think, not what we really want to do, because the text is hand-waving style, and that was the reason why it was put in an appendix and not in the main text. So we wanted to have the packet formats, but nothing more. So that's why the authors do not feel pretty good with option 3. Keep it as an appendix, but remove mandatory text is kind of does not really improve the situation. So what most likely makes most sense, at least from our perspective, is remove it. Just remove it and put the document, put the ECN stuff in a separate document and see if this can evolve in TSV. The question was also brought up by Gori, what about testing? So as far as I know, the negotiation was tested in interrupts, but the ECN reaction actually was never tested. So I'm not sure. I have never seen a bake-off where we were using, where we were marking packets and see if the reaction is correct.
Okay,
so the question for the working group is, which of the 3 options?
Maybe, David, I could take a couple of comments on this. When I looked at this, I think we have to do something if this document is going forward as a standards track document, and we're aiming full standard eventually with this document. So we need to be very clear about the language. and I was unhappy with Appendix A. So I'm pleased you're looking at it. My preferred option would have been 3, personally, because if this text had been really good and people had implemented it, that was the way to go. But you say not. Okay. I'm not hugely sold on number 2. I think we already have an RFC that describes what this was, and we don't need to further document it. So I'm interested in what the working group thinks about these things. Do people in the working group really want to have 2 or 1 or even 3? Oh, Maxim, why don't we ask Maxim? Go ahead.
Hello, Maxim personally speaking. What will happen? I mean, if we choose option 1, what will happen with parameter and chunk IDs in that case?
They will stay assigned.
Okay,
I'm
then
for sure TSVWG.
Do we wind up with a normative reference in that case?
You're asking if
Or
anyone is...
do we
if
document
anyone
the
is,
assignments for future use?
so you're asking if there is if there is an RFC referencing the ECN stuff for SCTP?
No, what I'm asking is if we do option 1, and the response to Max's question is that the chunks and IDs used by ECN stay assigned, does that result in a normative reference from the 4960 BIS draft to the new SCTP ECN draft?
No. I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't reference that. So 4960 BIS should be self-contained. It wouldn't talk about ECN at all.
I think there is also scope for, speaking as a chair, there is also scope for resurrecting the ECN draft. When this was first brought up as a topic of adding ECN to SCTP, ECN was not a topic we talked about that much at that time. Now there's been a lot of talk about ECN, so maybe it is appropriate to bring a work item to the group with some status that can talk about the use of ECN with SCTP. Right. So we could put something on the roadmap there, and I would feel very comfortable in asking our AD to go ahead with a milestone for that one.
Yeah, I would.
If
I think
there is energy to do it, of course. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think a milestone is fine. A question that I would have, and this is basically me drawing a blank, are the various IDs assigned in IANA registries?
Yes.
Okay, in which case we don't have a problem. We because the IANA registry preserves the assignments that Max asked about, and we don't have to discuss from the 4960 BIS draft. Okay, now I'm with you. Thank you.
Maybe there's some more comments on this, because this is a final change to this document. Is there any more comments on either the Appendix A or really on anything in this particular document? Magnus, do you have a comment?
Yeah, jumping in because your Jabber's guy doesn't seem to do. Bob Briscoe had a comment. The current text mimics RFC 3168, which is being updated to TCPM by accurate SCN. So it would only make sense to include ECN in STP if it goes straight for more accuracy, as in Quick and TCP.
Yeah, my reaction is I think what Bob cited is one more reason to do the split in option 1, because my general sense, both from what Michael described and other discussion, is that the ECN for SCTP is far less mature than the rest of 4960 BIS. It needs more soak time and work. Running code would be really nice, and hence splitting it out into a separate doc with a new milestone for the written group makes a lot of sense. Michael?
Michael, do you have any more comments?
Nope. I'm done with it. I was kicked out of the meeting.
How much time do you think you need, Michael, for preparing the transcription to Rev 3 format? How long do you think before we have a document that's ready for wider review?
I guess give me 4 weeks for the translation.
Okay, so 1 month. If people are willing to review this, we will need reviewers for this document. We will need multiple reviewers. I know people have read it, but we need people to read the document in entirety. If you would like to volunteer, please come forward. Otherwise, we will press for volunteers. This document can only be finalised and sent forward to the working group last call with some committed reviewers. Are you aware of anyone offering, Michael?
Pardon?
Are you aware of anyone offering to review this spec when we finish it?
I need to ask people before. So I haven't asked people, but
Okay.
I can contact them.
You have 1 month. Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So it
next
sounds
slide.
like it's about a month to revise it, about a month to review it, and then with luck, that gets us into sort of October. We might be able to working group last call it then.
Spencer? No. Michael, go ahead on the next slide deck.
Yeah. David, can you share them?
I'm speaking for Bob Briscoe.
Hang on a minute. Let me go. I need to go find the next slide deck. Give me a minute here. Sorry. We need the next slide deck, right?
Yep. And Spencer, in the meantime, please go ahead.
From Bob, the current text mimics RFC 3168, which is being updated in TCPM by ACC ECN. So it would only make sense to include ECN and SCTP if it goes straight for more accuracy, as in Quick and TCP.
Yeah, thank you. I think David's response to seeing that would be something I agreed with, which is yet more incentive perhaps for producing a new ID that takes ECN in the current way it's used and documents how to use that with SCTP. So thanks,
Yep.
Bob, and important input. Yeah, I think that's a good thing to consider.
Okay, SCTP net.
Can you share the slides?
I believe I am.
Oh, I'm not seeing them. So, but maybe it's my setup because I was kicked out of the connection.
They're good for other people. You can go.
Okay. Then let me see where the slides are. I need to have them locally. Okay, go to the second thing.
We're there.
This is a bit of outdated. This was when I wrote the slides at the weekend. So the latest version, revision 17, at that point of time, had changes, addressed Maxim's comments. Basically, he said that the net function is not required to send SCTP packets, so that we have a should there and not a must. And we changed that. Mohammed had also comments in revision 17, addressed our, I'm not talking about net device anymore, but net function. And the terminology was changed to internal address port VTEC, remote address port VTEC, and external address. That was done for 17. Next slide.
Okay,
And,
on the to-do slide.
Yeah, and the to-dos are not to-dos anymore. So Mohammed, so we discussed about, so he wanted changes for the reassembly code. One statement was that IP reassembly shouldn't, so why is it required that a NAT box must do IP reassembly? And it's not true, it just must be able to handle SCTP packets which come in fragmented. How it does it, it's left unspecified. So that was changed, and some other clarifications were also changed. So I think the latest revision, it's revision 20, addresses all of Murmit's comments, and Maxim also had one more, must versus should, which I missed. So revision 20 has no to-dos anymore.
Excellent.
So basically, it's ready for working group last call from my perspective.
Those were the magic words.
Does anybody have any comments on the draft or any comments on the proposal to start a working group last call? Apart from Spencer, who says he likes to see progress during IETF week. Does anybody else have any comments on the NUT draft? At this point, I like the idea of no comments. I would like to suggest that the working group starts a last call for this document. This has been many years in the making. Is it 12 or something? So it's great to get more comments at this stage. So my proposal would be, unless anybody says something on the list, we will start working group last call at the end of this week for this document, with a 3-week period to get review comments. Please read it. I have 2 people offering to review it. Please make sure you review it. Please make sure you put your comments to the list. Thank you, Michael, for doing work to make this draft finished.
Thank you.
Thank you indeed. It's nice to be getting work done. Okay, let's go get the next slides. All right. Greg, you're up.
Okay, thank you. Update on the NQB draft. You can go to the next slide. Status on this is that we actually have not published a revision since the last meeting, interims in March timeframe. Remaining work items that were discussed at that time still have not been addressed in a draft document, but I've got a couple of slides that follow that outline ways forward on a couple of these. So can continue to the next slide. So one of them is it was requested that we take a look at some of the common remarking policies or pathologies that have been discovered in studies and published in literature. And in particular, looking at the proposed value for the NQB code point, which is 42, and what would happen to that code point if it traversed a network that implemented one of these pathologies. So 2 references which I found had a fairly a good description of studies that have been done on remarking pathologies and were relatively recent, or listed in the references there. In those references, I found 6 policies that were considered to be common. I think there are likely others that are less common, that are kind of one-off situations, but in any case, these 6 were listed as common ones. So bleaching, obviously, that's well known. In this table, list the policy and then what the outcome would be for this value 42, with the first column or first sub-column, I guess, under that being what the 42 would translate into in the situation, and then a little bit of note on what the ramifications of that might be. So bleaching, everything gets to be 0, everything gets to be the same, no differentiation from other traffic. That seems as harmless as any other disturbed marked traffic. So I don't see an issue there, other than the fact that obviously no traffic after the bleaching happens gets any PHB other than default. The next three were all involving setting the precedence bits, the top 3 bits of the DSCP to a specific value, and there were 3 specific values that were seen, zeroing them out, or setting the value 1 or value 2, or 0, 1, 0. And these, all 3 of these pathologies would map a set of code points into either DSCP value 2 or AF11, AF11, or AF21. So NQB would fall into that group that gets mapped into those 3 specific code points. So NQB marked traffic would then become indistinguishable from AF41, AF31, AF21, AF11, as well as 3 currently unassigned code points, 2, 50, and 58. Obviously this is a pathology. So I think we're not expecting that networks that follow that that are downstream from this pathological remarking would be able to fully support the diff-serve architecture using the assigned or the standardized code points. Nonetheless, this seems to me to be relatively benign. So these AF classes, although they do indicate different priorities, above best effort, above default, they do also indicate the lowest drop precedence. That might be okay for NQB traffic, but again, this is a pathological situation, so we're not expecting obviously full support for the NQB PHP. The next one, setting the low 3 bits to all zeros, would result in 42 getting mapped into CS5, along with voice admit, expedited forwarding, and 3 other unassigned code points. This also may not be the end of the world. So in some contexts, all of those code points are treated the same already. For example, in a lot of Wi-Fi networks, all of those code points are put into the video queue, video access category. So it doesn't seem to be catastrophic. The last one, remarking all traffic to some value X, where that value X, there were a number of observed values that were fairly commonly used. Again, here, if all traffic is remarked to a specific value, then similar to bleaching, there's no differentiation possible. Similarly, this does not seem to be pathological, other than the fact that, again, you can't differentiate any traffic. You can't provide PHPs for any traffic. Another point to note there is that there were no observations of x equals 42 in the literature, so it seems like it's relatively safe to use 42 for NQB, that you won't have networks that are mapping all traffic into 42 into the NQB code point. And so, which is, I guess, highlighted again in the note in the bottom left. None of the common remarking policies result in any traffic being remarked as NQB.
Yeah. Let me put a little bit of gloss on this, and I probably should state this in an email to the list because it's probably going to go by too fast. Table's excellent, Greg. Thank you for doing the analysis. The next to the last row is the most important row in the table, because in addition to setting low 3 bits 000, there's also going to be some gear out there that does forwarding differentiation only on the 3 most significant bits. And so that row, something reasonable needs to happen. Namely, it should be okay to treat NQB traffic roughly the same as CS5, voice admit, and expedited forwarding. And so that is a positive design criteria. And it sounds like you think that yes, that's reasonable. Whereas as all the other 5 rows, the first 4 rows and the last row, are pathologies which we simply need to make sure that nothing disastrous happens. An example of something disastrous would be if NQB was remarked to LE, lower effort. That would be disastrous. Fortunately, we dealt with that at the time when we picked the default DSCP for lower effort.
Okay.
So long summary, this looks good, and the treated like CS5 voice admit expedited forwarding is the most important line on this slide.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, like I mentioned, Wi-Fi networks or these residential Wi-Fi networks are a good example of networks that do exactly as you indicated, treating or ignoring the low 3 bits of the diff or code point and mapping packets into access categories. And frankly, that's discussed in the draft specifically, how NQB is treated in Wi-Fi access points or residential Wi-Fi access points. And there are recommendations around configuring access points in a way that preserves the segregated queuing between the access categories, but eliminates the prioritization that is by default applied to the video access category relative to best effort. So, so that aspect is discussed in the draft already.
Cool. All right. And I've made note to myself to basically send a note outlining my comments to the list, because if we go to the next slide, actually, sorry, it's 2 slides down, where this topic will come up again. So over to you, Greg.
Yeah. One of the other action items was to just include in the draft a discussion of impact on higher layer protocols. One comes to mind, and if anyone has further suggestions on impacts that we should discuss in the draft, I certainly would welcome those. The one that comes to mind is in cases, so the draft recommends the implementation of a queue protection algorithm, or actually referred to as a traffic protection algorithm, that can prevent the NQB queue from being harmed by mismarked traffic. So it analyzes the flows, microflows that are entering that queue, at least the example of the DOCSIS queue protection algorithm, analyzes the flows that are entering that NQB queue, and also monitors the queue buildup or queuing delay in that queue, and redirects flows or packets of flows that are causing a queue buildup, redirects those packets into the other queue, the queue building queue. So it's protecting the latency there. The result of that is if you've got traffic in both queues, the queue building queue could have a queue built, in fact, and so it could have higher latency than the non-queue building queue. That's expected. And so if a flow is mismarked or perhaps is kind of on the borderline, it's potentially could see some of its packets remaining in the NQB queue, and some of the packets being redirected to the queue building queue, and so that could then result in out of order delivery.
So Greg, how significant is that issue if the traffic falls well within the NQB profile?
If the traffic fits well within the NQB profile, then that would be an extremely low risk. Mm-hmm. In addition, a flow that marks its packets as well in a node that implements both NQB and L4S, that the NQB queue is expected to also be supporting L4S style ECN marking or CE marking. So an NQB flow could mark its packets also ECT1 and then get an early indication that it might be on the borderline. If it starts seeing CE marks, that's an indication that it may be building up a queuing score and could be heading towards that territory of seeing some of its packets being sanctioned.
Thank you. That didn't frighten
Would be
me.
good to go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I was just saying that didn't frighten me. It sounds like something to talk about in draft somewhere, but didn't frighten me.
Sure.
It sounds like the general tenor of discussion here is that when used as intended, this shouldn't happen to NQB traffic. And so if this is a problem, it's an indication that perhaps traffic was marked NQB it shouldn't be, and or the queue protection algorithm could use some improvement, tuning, better parameters, something like that.
Okay, yeah, I can add some text to the draft that indicates that. Okay, good comments. Okay, next slide then. Next steps, so still have the action item, obviously, to revise the draft with text reflecting these previous two slides, as well as the others that were mentioned on slide 2. So that will happen within the next few weeks here. Unfortunately, didn't get to it in time for this meeting. The main item, I think, for discussion on the mailing list is consensus on the DSCP. The value 42 has been proposed since the beginning of the discussion on this draft. There was some discussion on the mailing list about potential other DSCPs, and there was a fair amount of discussion a couple of IETFs ago about that, and I think that there's not been any further discussion, and I haven't heard any recent objections after the discussion at the previous IETF, which I think was 106. So,
okay, a quick reminder as context, the DSCP is the default DSCP for this PHP. Others can be used if an operator wants to configure his or her network that way.
okay, so unless there are other comments, again, we'll post a revised draft soon. Ask for reviewers for that, and any concerns about the selection of code point, please make them on the mailing list.
Is there a need to allocate this code point before we publish the draft? Provisionally?
That would be helpful. I know there are systems that are wanting to make use of this code point, both end systems and network equipment, and would like to settle on classification of packets sooner rather than later. If there's an option to get this decided before working group last call, etc., that would be preferred.
I think that's possible. I mean, if we in relatively short order get to a relatively strong consensus that this is DSCP we want to use, there are procedures for early allocation. That'll be my problem. I think I'm the responsible working group chair and shepherd for this draft, so I'll have to figure out how to make that happen. But yes, it ought to be possible. Good suggestion.
Okay, so heads up to the working group. It has been proposed to use number 42 from our DSCP IANA registry for this purpose. If you see issues, please speak up.
Right. And the crucial consideration, I'm going to unilaterally go back a few slides. Crucial consideration is this row here. This is the next to last row on Greg's slide 3, which basically says that there is a good possibility that in some network environments, this traffic will be treated like CS5 voice admit and expedited forwarding, or treat it as an aggregate to get together with those. Any other comments on this draft? And Greg, it sounds like from the tenor of this discussion that working group last call for this draft by the end of the year is well within reason. Yes,
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, one less milestone to go adjust. Okay, let me go back to. Okay, let me go back to the agenda here. Hang on a minute. All right.
I think we.
Just a minute.
Wes, are you online?
I'm online, and I've tried to get a hold of the data center congestion control couple of presenters, but one of them is unavailable, and I don't see the other one joined in yet either.
Sure. Maybe they're getting ready for the Friday swap.
Hang on. Okay. All right. So here's the agenda. And Martin, I think you asked in chat that we move the quick NAC draft to Thursday.
Yes, quick is tomorrow, and I may actually have something to report depending how that goes.
So that makes sense. I like that.
Okay, and we've moved UDP options to Thursday. So I think we've run off the end of the agenda. That's an unusual occurrence for TSVWG. We generally have the reverse problem. Any concluding thoughts or comments on either the agenda or any of the drafts we covered today?
Can you pop up the agenda for the Thursday meeting, please? Just slide it up so we can see that.
Just a minute. It's mostly on the screen. Hang on a minute. There's the rest of it.
Yeah.
And actually, hang on.
So the things that have been added to Thursday's agenda are UDP options, for which Joe has been trying to implement what was talked about at the last meeting and on the mailing list. And there will be some update on this. It will be short. We will take a short input from Martin Duke on how he got on with talking about NAT with Quick and how not to use NAT with Quick. And then we will go into the ECN story with the L4S drafts and also ECN within the data center context, just to dip our toes into that idea of doing some sort of work, looking at how you might use ECN differently in a data center and whether this is suitable work for the IETF. So the last group of talks will really be looking ahead as to what we might do soon. But it'd be great to have a look at those ahead of the meeting so that you have thoughts.
Okay, and I will try to get the. Oops.
Since we're so massively ahead of time, this came up in Jabber. From the NQB draft, there was all this research that these are the implications using these various DSCP code points. So it points to the existence of research that the picking from the DSCP code space is not a neutral or random process, and I wonder if there would be a way to document some of the considerations in picking DSCPs in this working group. Do people think that would be worthwhile, and does anyone want to take on that work?
Spencer, go ahead.
I think that would be very valuable. Every time I ever had a conversation with David Black about what we were really going to do with these code points, I lost hair, and a lot of the knowledge is in people's heads. So I think that would be a really useful short draft.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it would be
David.
that short, but
yeah, I think it'd be a good idea. I'm not sure how short it is. I see Rod Grimes in chat says yes, do this. And I mean, I recall the nasty surprise when we thought we were done with the LEPHB draft, and then discovered that the code point that had been chosen that looked like a good idea was subject to remarking pathologies, and so.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. This is. If the draft has any more content than "Here Be Dragons," whatever you have would be useful, because it's really easy for people to just assume that this is a lot cleaner than we'd like to think. Yeah,
at the very least, I think we need to warn that the entire entire class of code points that we moved over to standards track in order to get the code point for LE. All the other code points in that class are subject to remarking to LE. Be very careful what you do with them is the kind of thing that is in people's heads. So I think you're right.
Yeah, and I mean, if that was written down any place, that would be great. And if it's not written down any place, that would be great. Thank you.
So I put myself in the queue as an individual now. So it's Gary Fairhurst again. We're not declaring our names at the mic, I noticed, which is equally the chair's fault. But Gary Fairhurst, an individual, we have these tools that we developed for doing those analysis when we did the LEPHB, and we're using them currently to support some work in 6-man. And we have a containerized version of our probe, which we were looking for places to run these tests from. We could easily add some more PHB measurements DSCP measurements, if people were interested. So as an individual, I think me and the research group I work with would be very happy to try and undertake some measurements in this space, and would love for people to collaborate with hosting measurement probes. Might even try and write a draft if people are interested. Drop me an email.
And I'm guessing from past experience that MapRG will also be a good place to take not only the measurements but the initial draft suggesting what the consequences of the measurements, both existing and new, are. In addition, I mean, we probably work on the draft and turn it from RFC in TSVWG, but MapRG is a really useful form. Seems like a really useful forum for this kind of discussion as well.
Anything else interesting to bring up?
Going once. Going twice. My goodness, we have an entry for the Journal of Irreproducible Results, a TSVWG meeting that ended early. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Goodbye. See you later in the week, please.